New this morning, Pope Francis, in the very early morning hours here in the U.S., issuing an extensive letter condemning the abuse described in a scathing report, a grand jury report of more than 300 Pennsylvania priests accused of abusing more than 1,000 child victims, and the length Roman Catholic Church leaders went to cover up those crimes. Pope Francis says, quote, "With shame and repentance, we acknowledge as an ecclesiastical community," in other words, the leadership, "that we were not where we should have been, that we did not act in a timely manner, realizing the magnitude and gravity of the damage done to so many lives. We showed no care for the little ones. We abandoned them." I want to bring in Sean Daugherty, who is a survivor of sexual abuse by a Catholic priest in Pennsylvania. You sat next to the Attorney General when he held that press conference, which was so eye-opening to so many people. What did you think of the Pope's letter today?
A lot of it was a repeat of the Attorney General's press conference. You know, he just admitted to what we already know, and the rest of it I've heard before. I mean, zero tolerance, we heard that after Boston. You know, what is zero tolerance? What we didn't hear is, "I'm sorry, I am from this point forward pleading with the Pennsylvania Senate leadership to enact the recommendations of the grand jury and listen to these victims and help these victims." I don't want to say defenders of the Pope, but there are people who would say he is the Pope of a billion Catholics, that as egregious and as horrifying as what happened in Pennsylvania is, this obviously is a wider problem. He's going to be going, for example, to Ireland, where they have had their own sexual abuse scandal. And so he really has to address this as the leader of all of those people. They have been addressing this for how many years? I mean, we get it. You have a sex abuse problem in the Catholic Church. We get it. Been there, done that. What are you doing to fix it? We've heard, you know, all of these little ones.
What would you like to see him do? What could, you know, there's a lot of conversation about extending the statute of limitations, whether or not, you know, leaders in the church, in addition to the abusers, should be held into legal account where they can be. So those are legal questions. But in terms of the church, what have they not done that's clear to you and other victims that has to be done?
Tell the truth once and for all on everything. Full mea culpa. They have these records across every state. They're secret archives. Make them unsecret.
Publicize them and also hand them over to the appropriate authorities. Pope Francis added this: "I am conscious of the effort and work being carried out in various parts of the world to come up with the necessary means to ensure the safety and protection of the integrity of children and of vulnerable adults, as well as implementing zero tolerance and ways of making all those who perpetrate or cover up these crimes accountable outside of, again, the legal system." And we have seen some of these priests go to jail. We also know that some of them who are named in that report are elsewhere now, and their parishioners were stunned to see that they were named in this report. What does the church need to do when it finds that they have a priest who is abusing children?
They need to call the police. He committed a crime. He raped a child.
Do you feel that is not being done here?
Absolutely not. If you steal money as a priest from a church, you go to jail. They prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law, and if you rape a child, they move you to another parish, to a new flock of unsuspecting children and families that have been groomed to receive it.
What has this meant, this report, to the folks who you know, and I know you know many of them, who have kept this so quiet for so long and have had to live with what this has done to their lives?
First, many would argue that they didn't keep it quiet. They've been talking about this for decades, you know, so I think they would say that it's really nice to finally have people listening to it at the scale that everybody is. This has been discussed decade after decade after decade. It's really what is the leadership of the Roman Catholic Church and its parishioners going to collectively do to now help all of these people that they've harmed.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.